There is a silent movement unfolding, one that is rarely spoken of yet, felt by many who walk with open eyes and open hearts. Those who have tasted even a glimpse of spiritual awakening begin to notice a strange impulse stirring within them. They are not running away, nor are they rejecting life itself, but they are slowly, almost imperceptibly, withdrawing from the familiar stage of society. This withdrawal is subtle. Friends may notice they attend fewer gatherings. Families may find them harder to reach, not because of conflict, but because something within them has shifted. Their absence is not dramatic, not filled with noise or proclamations. It is quiet, deliberate, and deeply necessary. The spiritually awake person finds themselves in an environment where conversations often circle around superficial concerns, where the pulse of modern life beats with the rhythm of endless consumption, competition, and distraction. For them, something feels out of place. The noise of the world that once seemed normal begins to feel unbearable. They sense the dissonance between the life society promotes and the life the soul craves. This creates an inner tension so strong that their very presence in social spaces becomes difficult to maintain. It is not that they judge others, nor that they feel superior. Rather, it is like a person who has learned to hear a higher frequency. When the ears are tuned to silence and depth, the roar of shallow noise becomes painful. Withdrawal begins quietly, often unnoticed even by the one experiencing it. At first, it may be a longing for solitude after a crowded day. Later, it turns into a conscious choice: fewer interactions, fewer explanations, fewer masks. They begin to see that their energy is not limitless, that being present in environments that demand conformity drains them in ways they cannot afford. Each social performance becomes a sacrifice, each forced smile a fragment of their soul slipping away. So, they begin to pull back, not to escape life, but to protect life's essence within themselves. This withdrawal is not laziness, nor is it rejection. It is protection. A seed that wishes to grow cannot remain on the surface forever. It must sink into the soil, hidden from view, in order to become what it is meant to be. Spiritually awake people feel this same necessity. Their souls call them inward, away from the glaring lights and the constant chatter, into a place where they can listen to something purer. The world may see absence, but in truth, it is presence. Presence with the inner world, with the unseen dimensions of being. And yet, this hidden withdrawal is not without pain. The one who awakens does not simply vanish without feeling the sting of separation. They remember the warmth of companionship, the laughter of community, the comfort of belonging. But every time they try to step back into those familiar spaces, something feels false, almost unbearable. They hear themselves speaking words that no longer carry truth. They watch conversations revolving endlessly around distractions, gossip, and trivial pursuits. And within, there rises a longing for something deeper, something real, something that cannot be found in the noise. This creates a strange paradox. They long to connect, but ordinary connections no longer sustain them. They long to share their insights, but they recognize how difficult it is to speak of what cannot be easily understood. They long to belong, but belonging demands a sacrifice of authenticity that their soul refuses to make. So, they withdraw, not in bitterness, but in quiet acceptance. Over time, the spiritually awake learn that their withdrawal is not a weakness, but a natural response to the weight of collective noise. They begin to realize that stepping away is not abandonment of the world, but an act of alignment with the truth they have discovered. And this alignment leads directly into the next recognition, that what they are pulling away from is not people themselves, but the suffocating noise of a society that has forgotten silence. This brings us to the weight of collective noise. When one begins to withdraw inward, it becomes impossible to ignore what is driving that retreat, and it is often the sheer weight of collective noise. Imagine walking through a crowded marketplace, where everyone is shouting at once, each voice demanding attention, each distraction louder than the last. This is not only a picture of the outer world, but also of the psychic atmosphere in which we now live. The awakened individual feels this noise not merely as sound, but as vibration, as heaviness pressing upon the soul. It is not the casual conversations or the simple joys of daily life that burden them, but the endless insistence on living without depth. Everywhere they turn, there are currents pulling toward distraction. Conversations revolve around possessions, appearances, competition, and fleeting desires. Social gatherings become less about communion of spirit and more about comparison of status. Even silence itself is invaded by the artificial glow of devices, the buzzing of notifications, the constant pressure to respond, to perform, to project. For most, this noise is normalized. It is the water in which they swim. But for those whose inner ear has awakened, every vibration is amplified, every hollowness is felt. The very air seems crowded with energies that demand attention, yet give nothing in return. To be spiritually awake is to be sensitive, and this sensitivity is both a gift and a burden. It allows one to perceive beauty and truth in places others overlook, but it also exposes them to the constant noise that most have numbed themselves against. While others adapt by hardening, by distracting themselves further, the awakened find themselves stripped of such defenses. They can no longer ignore the falseness in conversations that circle endlessly around emptiness. They can no longer tolerate the masquerade of superficial politeness that hides the deeper wounds no one dares to face. This noise is not only external. It seeps inward, becoming a storm within the mind. When surrounded by collective chatter, the awakened notice thoughts arising that are not truly their own, anxieties borrowed from the collective unconscious, fears planted by a society obsessed with survival rather than meaning. The awakened one feels the bombardment of these impressions like arrows against the psyche, each one demanding energy to deflect. It is exhausting, and it reveals why silence and solitude become not a luxury but a necessity. Without withdrawal, the noise threatens to drown out the whisper of the soul. Yet the tragedy is that this noise is often mistaken for life itself. Many equate being busy with being alive, being entertained with being fulfilled, being noticed with being worthy. The spiritually awake cannot accept this substitution. They feel the hollowness beneath the surface of all this noise. They see how society is addicted to distraction because silence would reveal too much, because stillness would force an encounter with truths long buried. For the awakened, this encounter has already taken place. They have stood in that silence and seen what lies beneath. And once this has been seen, returning to the noise feels like suffocation. This is why the awakened retreat is so misunderstood. To the unawakened, their silence appears antisocial, their distance looks cold, their withdrawal seems arrogant. But in truth, it is the natural response to being unable to participate in the endless drama of noise. To remain in such environments is to betray the inner truth they have found. So they begin to seek spaces where the noise lessens, where silence breathes again, where authenticity is not drowned by the clamor of appearances. But even in solitude, they carry the memory of this weight. It is not easily left behind, for the collective unconscious does not release its grip so quickly. The spiritually awake often find themselves wrestling not only with the external noise of society, but with the echoes of that noise within themselves. Every conversation they once entertained, every distraction they once indulged, every fear they once absorbed continues to echo. And this battle with noise leads to a deeper pain. One that comes not only from the environment, but from the relationships most dear to them. The pain of being misunderstood. As the spiritually awake person distances themselves from the collective noise, a deeper ache emerges, one that cuts closer to the heart than any crowded room or shallow conversation ever could. It is the pain of being misunderstood. Withdrawal is rarely seen for what it truly is, a protective retreat, an inner necessity, a movement toward alignment with the soul. Instead, it is almost always judged through the lens of the unawakened. Friends begin to whisper that something is wrong with them. Family members worry that they are depressed, arrogant, or that they have lost their way. Colleagues see them as detached or uninterested. The world demands explanations, but the awakened cannot offer any that would satisfy, because what they have experienced cannot be explained in the language of ordinary life. The difficulty lies in the gap between perception and reality. The awakened do not withdraw because they despise others, but because they cannot betray what they now know to be true. They do not fall silent because they have nothing to say, but because they recognize that the words they might share would not be received, would not be understood, would not be valued. And so they carry their insights in silence, bearing the weight of treasures that feel too fragile to be spoken aloud. What the world sees as pride is often humility. What appears to be distance is often love, a refusal to reduce the sacred into something trivial. This misunderstanding brings with it a loneliness more profound than physical isolation. To sit among people who cannot see what you see, who cannot feel what you feel, who mistake your silence for emptiness, is to know a solitude that is not cured by company. The spiritually awake do not crave being surrounded by bodies, they long for communion of souls. Yet in a society deafened by noise, that communion becomes almost impossible. They withdraw, not because they want less connection, but because they hunger for a connection so real, so raw, that ordinary interaction feels hollow in comparison. Often, attempts to bridge this gap end in pain. The awakened may try to express what they have found, perhaps clumsily, perhaps with too much fire or too much subtlety. They may speak of inner stillness, of shadow and light, of the illusions that keep humanity asleep. But their words are met with blank stares, polite nods, or worse, mockery. They are told to stop overthinking, to just enjoy life, to be normal again. And in those moments, the awakened feel a wound opening within them, the wound of realizing that the truth they have touched cannot easily be shared. It is not that others are malicious, but that most are simply not ready to hear. This loneliness, this deep ache of misunderstanding, often tempts the awakened back toward conformity. The pull to fit in, to belong, to silence their inner knowing for the sake of acceptance, is strong. But each time they attempt to wear the mask again, they feel the suffocation return. Something within refuses to go backward. The silence they retreat into may be painful, but it is honest, and honesty becomes more vital than comfort. Yet, there is also another side to this pain. Being misunderstood forces the awakened to go deeper into themselves, to find strength not in the approval of others, but in the alignment of their own soul. It teaches them to live without constant validation, to let go of the need to be seen or understood by everyone. In this way, misunderstanding becomes a teacher, stripping away the ego's desire to be recognized and leaving behind a truer form of selfhood. Still, this journey is not easy. The longing for authentic understanding remains. The spiritually awake often find themselves drawn to solitude, but within that solitude they also yearn for the rare moments of genuine meeting. Those encounters with another soul, who understands without explanation, who listens without judgment, who speaks the same silent language of the spirit. These rare connections, when they occur, feel like oxygen after years of suffocation. They remind the awakened that their withdrawal is not an end, but a path that leads to a higher form of communion. And so, the pain of misunderstanding, though heavy, becomes a bridge to the next stage of their journey. For in their solitude, they discover that there is a world within far richer than the world without. They learn that even if others cannot meet them where they are, the soul itself is waiting, ready to offer depths of meaning that no external connection could provide. This shift in focus, from outer belonging to inner communion, draws them further into the call of the inner world. When the outer world becomes too noisy and the H of misunderstanding grows too heavy, something begins to stir with even greater force. The undeniable call of the inner world. It is not a call that comes with words, nor does it arrive with dramatic signs. It is more like a whisper beneath the noise, a pull toward a silence that feels alive, a silence that does not suffocate but awakens. Those who have touched spiritual awakening cannot resist this pull, for within it lies a depth that the external world could never offer. The inner world reveals itself slowly, often first through the simple desire for solitude. At first, solitude may appear as a place of escape, a retreat from the burdens of noise and misunderstanding. But soon, it becomes clear that solitude is not escape at all. It is entry. It is the doorway into a dimension of being that is not bound by the chatter of society or the judgments of others. Here, in stillness, one begins to meet something far more real, the essence of the self, stripped of masks, stripped of roles, stripped of every false identity imposed by the world. In this inner world, one does not need to explain or justify. There is no demand to perform, no need to conform. There is only presence, and in that presence, truths begin to surface that were long buried under the noise of ordinary life. Old wounds rise to the surface, not to torment, but to be seen. Forgotten desires emerge, not for material gain, but for authenticity, for alignment with the soul's true path. The spiritually awake realize that what they once sought outside, in relationships, in achievements, in recognition, was only a reflection of what already exists within. The call of the inner world is magnetic, but it is also challenging. For to turn inward is to confront everything that has been ignored. The shadows of the self wait there, fears, insecurities, and suppressed emotions. Many resist this confrontation, preferring the distractions of society to the discomfort of self-knowledge. But the awakened have no choice. The silence they have entered leaves no room for denial. In solitude, the shadows emerge, and the soul demands they be faced. It is a confrontation not with enemies, but with forgotten parts of the self, longing to be integrated. This is why solitude, though healing, is not always peaceful. It is filled with storms, inner battles, nights of despair, and moments where the silence feels unbearable. Yet within these storms lies the promise of transformation. Each shadow faced becomes a key, unlocking new depths of wisdom, compassion, and strength. The awakened learn that to enter the inner world is to embark on the most dangerous, yet most rewarding journey of all, the journey of self-discovery. As they sink deeper, they begin to see that the outer world is a mirror, reflecting the unexamined parts of themselves. The noise that once tormented them outside is also inside, echoing as inner chatter, old conditioning, inherited fears. But in the inner world, they have the chance to break free. They can sit with this noise until it quiets, watch their thoughts until they lose power, and observe the illusions until they dissolve. What remains when the noise fades is something profound, the voice of the soul, steady and clear. This voice does not shout, it guides gently. It does not demand, it invites. It speaks not in words, but in knowing. It is the compass that points the awakened back to their true nature, to the ground of being that is unshaken by the chaos of society. And once they have touched this ground, once they have felt this truth, there is no turning back. The pull of the inner world becomes stronger than any desire for external validation. But this journey inward is not only about finding peace, it is also about transformation. For in the inner world, the spiritually awake are confronted not only with light, but also with shadow. They realize that their withdrawal, their sensitivity, their pain of misunderstanding, all lead them to a deeper task, to face the darkness within themselves. And this is where the journey takes a more perilous turn, into the realm of the shadow, where the real battle begins, the battle with their own inner darkness. The deeper the spiritually awake sink into the inner world, the more they realize that this sanctuary is not simply a place of light and peace. It is also a landscape filled with shadows, those hidden aspects of the self that have been buried, ignored, or denied for years. At first, these shadows appear subtly: an uncomfortable memory, a surge of unexplained anger, an old wound surfacing without warning. But as silence deepens and distraction fades, the shadows no longer whisper. They roar, and the awakened cannot escape them. For here in the inner world, every mask is stripped away. This confrontation is not something chosen lightly. It is demanded by the very process of awakening. For to awaken is not only to see the beauty of the soul, but to see its distortions, its fears, its attachments, and its unhealed pain. It is to come face to face with the darker impulses that society trains us to hide: the envy, the bitterness, the suppressed desires, the rage, the grief. These are not flaws to be despised, but truths to be understood. The battle with shadows is not about destroying them, but about meeting them, learning from them, and allowing them to become integrated into the whole. The difficulty is that shadows are not only personal, they carry the weight of the collective as well. The spiritually awake person often feels not just their own pain, but the pain of generations, the heaviness of the unconscious patterns passed down through families, cultures, and entire societies. To be awake is to be sensitive to these deeper currents, and this sensitivity becomes both gift and burden. The shadows of the collective reveal themselves in the silence too, pressing upon the awakened with the same intensity as their personal wounds. In facing their own darkness, they are also wrestling with the darkness of humanity. This battle is exhausting, often far more challenging than anything the outer world could demand. While others occupy themselves with distractions, the awakened sit with their fears. While others bury their pain in constant activity, the awakened stare directly into their sorrow. They allow grief to surface, rage to burn, despair to wash over them, not to be consumed by it, but to be purified through it. Each wave threatens to drown them, yet each time they emerge, they discover that they are stronger, clearer, and more whole. Yet the shadow resists integration. It clings to its secrecy, thriving in the places we refuse to look. The awakened often find themselves tempted to run back to the noise of society, where shadows can be masked by activity and drowned out by distractions. But once they have tasted the truth, there is no true escape. Silence will always call them back. The shadow once glimpsed cannot be unseen. The only way forward is through. In this battle, the awakened discover something paradoxical. The very parts of themselves they feared the most become sources of strength once faced. Anger, when acknowledged, becomes clarity and courage. Fear, when embraced, becomes wisdom. Grief, when felt fully, becomes compassion. What once seemed like demons are revealed as guardians of hidden power. The integration of shadow is not about erasing darkness, but about reclaiming the energy locked within it. But this integration does not make them saints. On the contrary, it makes them more human, more real, more grounded. The spiritually awake person who has faced their shadow does not walk with perfection, but with authenticity. They carry the scars of their battles, but those scars shine with depth and humility. They no longer need to present a mask of constant positivity or spiritual purity, because they understand that wholeness is born from embracing both light and dark. Still, society rarely understands this process. To the outside world, the awakened may look withdrawn, troubled, even unstable. Few realize that within their solitude, they are waging battles that few dare to face. And though this struggle feels intensely personal, it is never only for themselves. By integrating their own shadows, the awakened contribute to the healing of the collective. Every inner reconciliation ripples outward, influencing the unseen field that connects all beings. Their retreat is not abandonment, it is silent service. And this realization begins to shift their perspective. They start to see that even in their disappearance from society, they are serving it in ways the world cannot measure. Their silence becomes a medicine, their solitude a form of unseen work, their inner battles victories for more than just themselves. This understanding leads them to a new awareness, a recognition of the invisible service they are offering through their very withdrawal. As the spiritually awake person emerges from the confrontation with their own shadows, something begins to shift in how they perceive their place in the world. They may no longer be visible in the ways society measures contribution, through constant activity, public recognition, or external achievement, but their very withdrawal becomes a form of service. To the unawakened eye, they appear to have stepped away, to have vanished into solitude, to have chosen silence over participation. Yet beneath this disappearance lies a deeper truth. They are serving in ways unseen, through the quiet power of inner transformation that radiates beyond words or actions. Every battle with shadow they endure does not only heal themselves, it loosens knots in the collective unconscious that bind humanity. Their willingness to face their own fear helps soften the fear that hangs heavy in the human atmosphere. Their capacity to integrate anger, grief, and despair makes space for others to feel less overwhelmed by their own. Though society cannot measure this work, it is no less real. The invisible service of the awakened is not dramatic, not loud, but it is quietly revolutionary. It is the tending of the unseen roots that hold up the tree of human life. This service often feels thankless. There are no ceremonies to honor those who spend nights wrestling with their own inner storms, no applause for the hours of silence in which they allow ancient wounds to surface and dissolve. In fact, they are more likely to be misunderstood, labeled as reclusive, unproductive, or strange. Yet, what they carry inwardly radiates outward. Just as one candle lit in a dark room changes the entire space, the awakened person's inner light subtly alters the field of consciousness around them. Even in silence, even in absence, they are participating in the great work of healing. Consider how often we underestimate the power of presence. A single person who has found peace within themselves can bring calm to a room without speaking a word. A single individual who has embraced their shadow can stand without judgment, making others feel safe to reveal their own truth. The spiritually awake who retreat from society are not withholding their gifts. They are cultivating them, refining them, preparing them so that when they do appear, they embody something that words alone cannot convey. Their gift is not in what they say, but in who they have become. This invisible service is not only for others, but for the balance of the whole. Humanity has long been pulled toward extremes: endless pursuit of material gain, obsession with appearances, addiction to distraction. The spiritually awake, by stepping away from these currents, create a counterweight. Their silence balances the noise. Their stillness balances the chaos. Their refusal to participate in illusions weakens those illusions for everyone. Though they may seem absent, they are in truth holding a sacred thread that keeps humanity tethered to the possibility of awakening. The beauty of this service is that it requires no recognition. The awakened do not withdraw to be praised or remembered. They withdraw because the soul compels them to do so, because the work they are called to is not visible to the eye, but felt in the depth of being. And yet, there is a paradox here. For while they appear to disappear, they are in fact preparing for a return. Their absence is not permanent exile, but a necessary incubation. Just as the seed must vanish into the soil to one day break the surface, the spiritually awake retreat not to abandon, but to transform. Their service is invisible not because it is hidden forever, but because it is still in process. They know that society may not yet be ready to hear what they have discovered, may not yet be able to bear the light they carry. And so they wait, quietly shaping themselves in silence, quietly anchoring truth in their being. This waiting is not stagnation, but ripening. And when the time comes, when the collective is ready, When the soil has softened enough for new growth, they return, not as the same person who once disappeared, but as one who carries within them the presence of something far greater. This leads us to the Great Return. The disappearance of spiritually awake people from society is never the end of their story. It is only a stage, an interval of silence that conceals a profound transformation. Just as the seed must vanish beneath the soil, hidden from sight, so too must the awakened retreat into obscurity. But a seed is never meant to remain buried. In the right time, under the right conditions, it breaks through the earth and reaches for the light. So it is with those who have withdrawn. Their quiet absence is not a permanent farewell, but a preparation for return, and this return carries a weight and depth unlike anything they knew before. The Great Return is not dramatic, not filled with spectacle. It does not announce itself with trumpets or grand proclamations. It is subtle, often unnoticed by the many, but deeply felt by the few whose lives they touch. When the awakened reemerge, they carry a presence that speaks louder than words. Their silence has refined them. Their battles with shadows have humbled them. Their communion with the inner world has transformed them. They return not to preach, not to persuade, but to embody. And embodiment is the most powerful form of teaching. This return is often misunderstood. The world expects those who reappear to be conquerors, to come back with achievements, recognition, and proof of their worth. But the awakened do not return with the treasures society expects. They return with treasures of a different kind, calm in the midst of chaos, wisdom that cuts through illusion, compassion that sees beyond appearances, and a steadiness that no external storm can shake. Their lives themselves become a message, a living testimony to the possibility of transformation. In their presence, others begin to feel something they cannot easily name. Some will feel a discomfort, for the light of the awakened shines into places many would prefer to keep hidden. Others will feel relief, as though a weight they could not describe has suddenly lifted. Still others will feel inspired, drawn toward their own inner depths by the quiet example before them. The Great Return is not about the awakened speaking louder than the noise of the world, but about creating a different frequency, one that resonates in silence and truth, drawing to it those ready to hear. This return is also selective. The awakened do not throw themselves back into the noise recklessly. They know that, to protect their inner clarity, they must move carefully, choosing where to give their energy, choosing when to speak, and when to remain silent. They no longer seek to convince or to save, for they understand that awakening cannot be forced upon anyone. Instead, they offer their presence as a gift, freely, without demand, without expectation. Whoever is ready will receive it, and whoever is not will simply pass them by. The Great Return is also a cycle. It is not a single event, but a rhythm of withdrawal and reemergence. The awakened step back when they feel the weight of noise pressing too heavily, then return when their inner well has been replenished. This rhythm mirrors the natural cycles of the earth itself. The tide that recedes only to rise again, the seasons that withdraw into winter only to blossom in spring. In living this way, the spiritually awake align themselves with the deeper pulse of life, a pulse that is not bound by the restless speed of society, but guided by timeless rhythms. And yet, this return is not only for others, it is also for themselves. For in returning, they test the strength of their transformation. They bring the stillness they have cultivated into the turbulence of the world, not to escape, but to live fully within it. Each encounter becomes a mirror, showing them how deeply they have integrated the shadows, how firmly they stand in truth, how freely they can give love without losing themselves. In this way, society becomes the proving ground for their inner work, the place where silence is translated into action, where solitude ripens into compassion. The Great Return, then, is the fulfillment of the journey. It shows that the disappearance of the awakened was never abandonment, but a necessary descent into the depths of being. And when they rise again, they rise carrying more than just their own transformation. They carry the seed of collective transformation, silently offered to anyone who is ready to receive it. For while they may walk quietly, their presence reverberates far beyond their immediate circles. They embody a possibility that humanity desperately needs, the possibility of wholeness, of depth, of living with authenticity in a fractured world. And in embodying this, the awakened remind us of something essential. That silence is not emptiness, that disappearance is not loss, that retreat is not defeat. It is preparation. It is renewal. It is the path by which one becomes whole, so that when they return, they can serve not with words alone, but with their very being. And this is where the journey points toward its final understanding, the conclusion that ties together the mystery of their disappearance, their silence, their solitude, and their return. The quiet disappearance of spiritually awake people is not a mystery to be feared, nor a tragedy to be mourned. It is a sacred rhythm, a journey that mirrors the deepest truths of the soul. They withdraw not because they despise the world, but because they see it too clearly. They step back, not because they have nothing to give, but because they must cultivate within themselves what cannot yet be offered in the noise. Their silence is not empty. It is full of battles fought in the unseen, shadows embraced, truths uncovered, and wisdom ripened in the soil of solitude. To walk this path is to endure the pain of misunderstanding, the heaviness of collective noise, and the loneliness of standing apart. Yet through each of these trials, something greater is forged. In silence, they find the voice of the soul. In solitude, they meet the shadows that hold the keys to their wholeness. In retreat, they learn that true service does not always wear the clothes of visibility, but often shines most brightly when hidden. And so, when they return, they do not come back as who they once were. They return as vessels of a deeper presence, carrying the fragrance of stillness, the steadiness of truth, and the humility of those who have wrestled with their own darkness and emerged whole. Their reappearance is not for recognition, but for embodiment. They remind us that another way of being is possible, a way rooted not in endless noise, but in silence, not in appearances, but in authenticity, not in fragmentation, but in wholeness. The great paradox is that in disappearing, they never truly leave us. Their silence continues to work in unseen ways. Their solitude continues to ripple through the collective. Their inner victories continue to light paths for others they may never meet. They are not gone. They are working in dimensions society cannot yet measure. And their journey shows us that what looks like retreat is in fact return. What feels like loss is preparation for renewal. And what appears to vanish often carries the most enduring presence of all.